When we think of the ocean giants around today, we usually think of whales, sharks, and squid. But some of the biggest and most significant ones around are also turtles. These slow but majestic shelled reptiles seem like they've seen the world through the ages. And in many ways, they have. Not only being some of the oldest animals around today, but becoming some of the biggest throughout their natural history. And the biggest of them all often hail from the sea, including one of, if not the largest sea turtle to ever roam the earth, the Gamera-sized sea turtle called Archelon. Discovered in 1895, Archelon was a large sea turtle from the late Cretaceous period, hailing from approximately 80 to 74 million years ago. So it's only fitting that the name Archelon means ancient turtle. This turtle was one of the largest ever known, with the largest able to grow to a whopping 15 feet long or 4.6 meters, with a carapace over 4 meters or 13 feet wide. If that didn't tip the scales, the weight estimates of this turtle absolutely did. With an estimated 2 to 3 tons, it was about as big as a car. If Gamera was a real turtle, this would be it. Now you might think, how does such a large turtle handle an even larger shell? Well, growing to such a large size often means adapting to the extreme sizes with your own extreme adaptations. In the case of Archelon, the composition of the carapace had a very spongy makeup in its skeleton, something eerily similar to those of dolphins and ichthyosaurs, an adaptation that not only allows the carapace to be more hydrodynamic, but most importantly, reduces the weight of the carapace substantially, allowing for much easier support in carrying a shell the size of a car. In addition, Archelon had incredibly dense bones, far more dense than any modern turtle. This unique structure was crucial for buoyancy, allowing Archelon to weightlessly fly through the water as it controlled its ballast. These adaptations don't stop with the shell, however. After all, a large sea turtle needs large limbs to support it, and the size of Archelons come in spades. Like other sea turtles, Archelon possessed 4 flippers, 2 composed of its hind limbs, and the others being their large, paddle-like forelimbs. Their shoulder girdles were strong and heavy in order to power their very large fins, allowing them to withstand the extra stress of the animal's weight, allowing the large paddles to flap almost like wings underwater, or, when it was necessary, help drag its body mass across the land when it has to lay eggs. The large flipper-to-body ratio of Archelon raises several fascinating possibilities for this long-extinct turtle. Based on this ratio, Archelon may have been able to travel long distances throughout the Cretaceous seas. Although it might not have been able to sustain high speed during swimming for long periods, it could still have been able to maintain a cruising speed as it traveled through the water. The shell itself even played a role in locomotion. Unlike most modern sea turtles, Archelon didn't have a hard dermal shell. Instead, it had an expansive, leathery carapace that covered its body. The leathery exterior of the carapace offered additional support to the large shoulder girdles, a trait shared only by one modern sea turtle, the leatherback sea turtle. While Archelon may look like your typical sea turtle, outside of the size of course, the familial ties of Archelon has been quite the roller coaster. While it may look like a modern sea turtle, or a chelonid as they're scientifically called, Archelon actually belongs to its own family of giant Cretaceous sea turtles called the protostegids. Originally, it was thought that Archelon and protostegids were close relatives of modern leatherback sea turtles, potentially even being their direct ancestors, sharing various characteristics with the modern giants of today, such as the leathery carapace, large size, and other anatomical quirks. However, it was later found that these quirks likely weren't the result of direct relation, and instead were likely convergent, or unrelated animals sharing similar traits. More recent research points to something shocking, that protostegids are likely their own group of sea turtles separate from modern ones, and split off fairly early from one another by the late Jurassic and early Cretaceous, and are not directly related to one another. Instead, many of the similarities and anatomical features that they share likely came about from taking on similar roles in the ecosystem, from evolving better fins for swimming to different shell structures for protection in hydrodynamics. However, these similarities aren't without their differences. For instance, Archelon has comparatively weaker arms and shoulders to those of modern sea turtles, especially to the likes of modern leatherbacks, which is shocking to say the least, until you realize that modern leatherback sea turtles are quite literally built to go the distance, and need very strong flippers to travel literal miles of ocean. Now on the surface, no pun intended, you'd think Archelon would be capable of the same feats, being a giant-sized turtle itself. However, the spread of the flippers, along with the carapace to fin ratio, indicate a lifestyle far different than any leatherback. However, the most damning piece of evidence for this difference comes from Archelon's other characteristic feature, its sharp, hooked beak. Archelon's entire skull was unlike any modern sea turtle, or even any other protostegid for that matter. Its narrow nostrils sat at the top of the skull, rather than the forward snout position of other sea turtles, and the cheekbones were rounded and far less projected as well, thanks to the large beak. The beak of Archelon resembled something like a bird of prey rather than a turtle, with the upper jaw ending in a sharp, hook-like shape that curved and locked with the bottom jaw. And yet, it wasn't quite like that of a bird of prey either, with the cutting edge being far more dull by comparison. So what did Archelon eat with such a wild beak? It's a question paleontologists have been asking themselves for quite some time. Several potential directions of its diet have been proposed. Unlike the many jellyfish-eating sea turtles of the modern day, Archelon seemed to have preferred a more hard-bodied selection. Based on the hook-shaped beak of this turtle, along with the structure of the cheek and the jawbones, Archelon may have been hunting animals with tougher exteriors, scouring the seabeds for crustaceans and shellfish, using its strong beak to crunch hard-shelled prey, similar to loggerhead sea turtles. Alternatively, it may have even hunted fish and small vertebrates, using its hook-like beak to snatch small animals or to shear off chunks of flesh when feeding. Archelon's biology has been a keen point of interest for this animal, especially in regards to how it interacted with the rest of its environment, including the thick chest armor. Archelon possessed thick chest armor that was not only a means of protection from predators, but also a guard against potential environmental hazards, like coral and sharp rocks, spending most of its time hunting along the bottoms of seabeds, rather than patrolling the open ocean. Between its thickened shell and sharp, hooked beak, Archelon was equipped to survive in a sea full of very tough customers, and their fossils have the scars to prove it. The original fossil specimen of Archelon has a missing part of its hind flipper, with the remaining bone showing signs of stunted growth. This in itself not only showcases that the turtle survived the injury, but the signs of stunted growth indicate that these were obtained early in the turtle's life. But what type of creature would take a bite out of what was the closest thing to a real-life Gamera? Archelon was recovered from a site called the Pier Shale Formation in South Dakota. But what is a sea turtle doing in South Dakota of all places? Well, Archelon lived during the early Campanian stage of the Cretaceous period, approximately 80 million years ago. During this time, North America was a very different land. In fact, some of it wasn't even land at all. Instead, much of the continent was submerged under a shallow sea called the Western Interior Seaway, a seaway that was once so vast it split North America in two. However, this seaway had another name, Hell's Aquarium, thanks to the abundance of ferocious creatures that once swam its waters. From the giant predatory fish like Zephactinus, to a myriad of shark species like Cretoxyrhina and Squalicorex, to giant ocean-going sea reptiles like the long-necked elasmosaurs and the serpentine mosasaurs that ruled these waters with impunity, many of which ate Archelon. Tylosaurus in particular was one of the biggest mosasaurs of all time, and would have eaten any and everything that moved, with several fossil tylosaurs preserving the stomach contents of their last meals, feeding on a variety of animals like plesiosaurs, seabirds, sharks, smaller mosasaurs, and of course, protostegid turtles. In fact, protostegids were fairly well known to have been a favorite item on a Tylosaurus's menu. Even outside the sea, Archelon wasn't quite out of the woods. Upon coming to shore to lay their eggs, they would have faced new, more alien threats by comparison, from gigantic alligators like Deinosuchus, and of course, the large predatory dinosaurs that patrolled the shores. And that's just the adults. After all sea turtles start small, and have even rougher starts because of it, and scramble to the water while avoiding all manner of land-going predators, like crabs and seabirds. And even as far back as the Cretaceous, these same dangers were present to baby Archelon. However, one thing Archelon shared in common with modern leatherbacks that allowed them to overcome these struggles is fast growth. Based on stretch marks on Archelon bones, these marks indicate that this prehistoric turtle possessed fast growth throughout its life. Fast growth that in itself is a notable characteristic in protostegids, with a study in 2023 comparing the remarkable growth patterns of protostegids and leatherback sea turtles. This growth rate was not only fast, but it was indicative of another remarkable trait. While you might think as reptiles, sea turtles would be cold-blooded or exothermic, a term referring to animals that can't regulate their own body temperature without the assistance of external sources. However, leatherback sea turtles have found a way around this through the use of gigantothermy, or the phenomenon when an animal grows so large its sheer mass is able to store and regulate heat with little need for external sources, which gives them an increased metabolic rate. And if protostegids also possessed this similar metabolism, it would mean that potentially, even Archelon and its kin were gigantotherms as well, while offering them the ability to pursue more active lifestyles. Sadly, these unique adaptations couldn't save Archelon from a changing world. During the late Cretaceous, the western interior seaway was under constant change, growing and shrinking in size throughout its presence inland, and by the late Campanian stage 74 million years ago, it was at its apex. However, as North America's inland sea grew, Archelon and other protostegids began to decline. It's unknown why Archelon went extinct by the end of the Campanian stage of the Cretaceous, but it's likely due to the subsequent change in climate combined with the changing environment of the seaway, affecting Archelon's food supply and the world around it, including their nest sites. It's even been suggested that Archelon specifically began to lose their annual nest sites they depended on as the seaway began to expand. It's important to remember that extinction isn't just a mass die-off, but a decline in a species' ability to reproduce. Your species isn't going to continue if you can't make more of you, and instead, making way for modern groups of sea turtles to begin to take shape. In fact, colonids would begin to radiate quite rapidly as protostegids began to disappear, taking on the roles left empty by their distant cousins, which led to the colonids not only surviving long past the age of reptiles, but remain the only true marine reptiles left in our oceans and seas. Ironically, while Archelon was not the ancestor to modern sea turtles, its absence did manage to pave the way for the ocean giants that swim in our waters today. However, Even today, sea turtles are facing extinction now more than ever. Between global warming, pollution, and human encroachment on their habitats, many species of sea turtles have faced a rapid decline in their numbers. Fortunately for these animals, there are efforts to assist in raising their numbers, from facilities like Brevard Zoo in the US, treating several sea turtles a year with rehabilitation and recovery centers, to the wider Caribbean Sea Turtle Conservation, or WIDECAST network, in places like Trinidad, helping to protect and support leatherback sea turtle nests. And of course, one of the most important organizations of them all, Greece's Sea Turtle Protection Society, called Archelon. Archelon is one of the most important genera of sea turtle in the fossil record, not just for its giant size, but its contributions into understanding the diversity of sea turtles, both as they were in the past and especially as we know them today.